Good afternoon, everybody. This is High Point Mayor Jay Wagner. For those listening online, I'm calling to order our special meeting of High Point City Council today. We are here at City Hall present, or I'm present at City Hall, as is Councilman Hudson, Jones, and Jefferson. Councilman Moore has informed me that he may not be at the meeting today, that he's traveling out of town. We also have some council people present remotely. Councilman Tyrone Johnson, are you with us?
Yes, Mayor, I'm here.
And Councilman Chris Williams, are you with us remotely?
Did you say Williams? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Williams, yes, Williams.
Yep, I'm here.
And Councilman Michael Holmes, are you with us remotely?
I am here, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. And I saw Monica Peters on there, but now I don't, so maybe she'll pop in at some point. And Cyril has stepped out of the room momentarily. He's also listed as remote, but he's here. So, okay. So the purpose of us getting together today, the special meeting has been called to discuss several specific items. We received a report from staff a couple of weeks ago regarding several issues that we asked them to give us more information on. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss these items, plus the request by Councilwoman Peters for a distribution of funds to the Southwest Renewal Foundation. Before we begin, we need to go into a short closed session for some legal advice from our attorney. So I'll need a motion to go into closed session.
Go into closed session.
Motion's been made by Councilman Hudson. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Johnson. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none, is there anyone opposed to going into closed session? Okay, hearing no opposition, we are now in closed session. We will Okay, this is High Point Mayor Jay Wagner. We're now out of our closed session. We're ready to resume our meeting on budget issues. And so what I'm going to do now is turn the meeting over to our Assistant City Manager, Eric Almeida, for an update on some of the issues that council asked him to give us some information on.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. My hope today was to continue with I think it's a 6-page handout that I gave you all last Monday. We got through page 3, I believe. One of the things that we talked about with the MWBE program was this so on the bottom of page 3 there, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I talked about the possibility of partnering with Guilford County. They have recently embarked on their disparity study. I was able to talk to their consultant, Griffin and Strong. The typical cost of a study for a city our size would be about $300,000. There was some thought that there would be some economy of scale if we were to partner with Guilford County. The number I got back was there is some economy of scale, but it's probably a savings of $50,000 or $60,000. So it's still a $240,000 to $250,000 endeavor if we were to move forward with partnering with Guilford County and Griffin and Strong. The other option would be to solicit RFPs from multiple companies and see what the proposals came back at. I passed out some additional information to you all and sent it out on email earlier today for some information that we compiled for the fair housing comparisons from the city of Greensboro, the city of Durham, and Winston-Salem. I believe some of our initial estimates of a position cost were shared. We feel pretty comfortable that the annual cost of that position would be, salary and benefits would probably be about $60,000 to $75,000, just depending on where that classification would be, and then with about a $12,000 to $15,000 annual supplies, training, that type of cost. So it is you know, I'd say $80,000 to $90,000 annual cost for that position that we talked about. The city of Greens, the other issue that we brought up was what is the legal cost for internal staff or for external staff. It really depends how robust our program is, how many cases we generate. One issue that we've talked about and it's in the information is that some of these other cities do receive reimbursements from HUD for a portion of their cost, but that's pretty much based on what the caseload is. So there is some potential that there would be some federal reimbursement for some of those costs, but until we build a program and start a program, I don't know that we could really put a number to that. Are there any questions on either of those issues? The next thing on our list on page 4 at the bottom was addressing the strategic plan of targeted neighborhood initiatives. You know, I think staff is looking to council for what that program may be, but I think we feel pretty comfortable right now with the readings that we've had of the American Rescue Plan funds and how those can be used. As I said in an email earlier today, we're waiting to get final guidance, but I think it's pretty clear that most any activities that we wanted to do, that council wanted to do with the targeted neighborhood initiative could fall within the use and the parameters of those funds as we know them today. So I think from our perspective, we have many of these uses that are tied in with what community development does. Things like lead-based paint remediation, development of affordable housing, voucher programs to assist people relocating from concentrated areas of low opportunity, home repair programs, and housing for the homeless programs. we feel pretty comfortable in saying that we could use those American Rescue Plan funds to start that program. One of our concerns would be down the road when those funds, we don't have access to those funds, how do we continue to fund those reoccurring costs?
My reading of the plan says that we have to have the funds sort of allocated by the end of 2024, but they can go as far as 2026 and
Correct.
for the total expenditure,
Yeah,
right?
we would need to have those funds under contract.
That's
before
right, under
2020.
contract by 2024.
That's correct.
And we get half this year and half next year.
Correct. The next issue we talked about was expanding Wi-Fi and broadband access to parts of our community that don't have those services. There's a couple of different initiatives happening right now. One is the High Point Schools Partnership. I've met with Matt Teal from the partnership a couple of times and had some good conversations, had some good interactive conversations with a gentleman from Charter Communications, which is Spectrum. They're statewide governmental affairs person. There are a lot of resources available to expand access for broadband from the federal government, from the FCC. There are barriers that we know of. Cost is the main one, but right now in High Point, we don't have a complete coverage map, but the gentleman from Charter and we're hearing from North State that the majority of the city has access in close to their neighborhoods. So it's not a situation like we have in rural areas where there's just simply no infrastructure. There is infrastructure. It's getting that infrastructure from the street or from the pole to the house, and then overcoming the barrier of citizens being able to afford that. The FCC program, it's called the EBB program, Extending Broadband Benefits, I believe is the acronym. Households can apply for a $50 a month voucher, which under Charter's specific plan would now bring the cost to $18.99 a month, which is a much better cost than $68 a month or $68.99. But that's still a barrier. And so what the schools partnership is doing is trying to figure out how to bridge that gap. And so there may be some opportunity to use American Rescue Plan funds there as well to bridge that gap and to help get that access into homes. The partnership is trying to pilot adding 100 homes a month for the next 3 months, and working with the school district to identify those families that don't have access that need it. On a different track, there's the TDI initiative, the Piedmont Regional Technology and Data Institute initiative. They have a pilot program that they've kind of built to where they would connect 6,000 homes in Guilford County, 5,000 in Greensboro, and 1,000 in High Point. There is a price tag with that. It's a little bit different technology. It's not broadband like you would have in your home, but it's more of a modem-based broadband, which would simulate what students have in school. So it would be restricted to certain websites, so it's not just wide open. That is a one-time cost of $4.7 million and about an $800,000 or $900,000 annual operating cost. They are seeking information or seeking funding from the federal government, the county government, state government, philanthropic funding, and so that is a project that has gained some momentum. Guilford County is actually issuing an RFP to try to help guide that in a way to figure out what the barriers to access, broadband access is. So we've been in conversation with Guilford County as well. But I say all that to say that this is a very specific use that the rescue plan funds have identified and said that we could use those funds if we chose to for expanding broadband access. So just wanted to report that there is a lot of momentum here. We're also hearing from an outside party who's interested in investing in broadband access in Guilford County, and there's been a couple meetings on that as well. Are there any questions on the broadband access?
Eric,
Yes, sir.
this is Councilman Holmes. I remember back kind of at the height of COVID, I brought this subject to you guys, and I had worked with Dr. Contreras over at the Guilford County, and she had provided me with some heat maps that were very detailed in terms of where we faced some issues in terms of access. I can't imagine that map is any different now. Is it, from what you've seen, and if you still have that information, is it fairly close to what we provided back last year or earlier this year?
Yeah, I think it's really a couple different, what the school district provided was more where they know that their families of their students don't have the service in their home. But it's not that there's not access to that service. There is access through charter, through North State, and there may be some other smaller players that I'm not aware of. So when we talk to Charter Communications, they said, well, we have a coverage map. We can assure you that 95% of the city has access to broadband. The access doesn't extend beyond the street or the pole that's in the right of way. So it's that barrier of getting that access into the home, and that's a cost barrier. And so
I'm sorry. So what we're looking at right now is that we're attacking both the access barrier in terms of coverage, plus the access barrier in terms of cost. Like now we have the American Rescue Funds and other potential investments that can attack the cost factor as well as the access factor.
correct. I think that's a good way to put it. The other difficult part that we have is when the guy from Charter's here and I say, can I have your map of your coverage area? He says no, because it's confidential, it's proprietary information. North State says the same thing, so that gives us a big challenge of figuring out exactly where the coverage is, but anecdotally, they both will say the majority of the city is covered, and there may be, it's probably a lot less costly to go ahead and incentivize a private company to cover those areas that aren't covered, if we could, get that confidential
what they were
information
and how big
from
they
them.
Sounds like a non-disclosure agreement
Yeah.
is in the offer.
Yeah. So Eric, will you also try to work out some type of, standard speed or access speed? Because, all broadband is not built the same. You could have, access speeds that, are much faster for, in some areas than others. So is that part of the conversation?
Yeah, I believe that in order for Charter or North State to access the FCC funds through that program, I think they have a floor of 30 megs, which is high speed from my understanding of it. I'm not a technical person, but I believe that is the floor. So there is a threshold they have to meet to be able to access those funds.
Thank you.
Can you keep us posted on what Matt Teal is doing as well? I know he's
Certainly.
applying for grants too.
Yeah,
so.
I will tell you, having an advocate like Matt in the community is tremendous, and
Yes.
he's not going to rest
Yes.
and let it slide. So
This item and the previous item about targeted neighborhoods, we're, at least what you said is that we're looking at potentially using the ARPA funds for that. So is that something that you would bring to us along with the capital budget that we talked about? I mean, it's not technically part of this general fund budget we're going to vote on. It's
correct.
part of what's coming later.
I think from my perspective, my recommendation to the city council would be let us get a better feeling for all the rules and regs that the federal government's gonna come down with. Let us bring back a recommendation with specifics or broad categories, and likely sometime in July would be probably the best time frame. Like I sent in an email today, you know, we've been trying to hit every webinar that's out there from all our partners, and I think truly a couple of them have really said patience is the best thing right now. Let's use this as a time of planning and patience so that we don't get committed to doing something that the federal government then comes back and says, well, no, you really can't do that, or it's really restricted in this area. And there may be things that part of that interim rule that they may expand. They may say, you can do this, and we don't want to limit ourselves up front. And so I think it's important to get that feedback, to get the community feedback as well as has been mentioned.
So there were a couple more things, solid waste and the electric rate.
I believe, Mr. Hudson, I believe you asked a question about solid waste funds and which parts of that fund are, have revenue, positive operations versus revenue negative. The composting facility, the landfill, and collections all typically run at a slight surplus. The material recovery facility runs at a deficit, but altogether, that fund, we're nonprofit, so it funds. They run at either surpluses or deficits, but then the surpluses that we have do fund capital projects at the landfill and our annual contributions to the post-closure for the landfill facility. There was also a question, I believe, from Councilman Moore, who asked about our comparisons of our electric rates to Duke. We don't have all of Duke's rate charts, so I just use my personal bill. I'm a Duke customer, and with our proposed 10% decrease and the proposed 5.5% decrease that Duke currently has before the Utility Commission, that once those go through, the City of High Point residential customer will have a slight 4.9%, will be over what a Duke customer would pay once those are implemented. So we've closed that gap quite a bit, and we'll close that gap as going forward.
So Eric, my question also was collection fees and landfill fees are separate. So collection fees do not go to running the landfill, correct?
Correct. Since they both annually run at a surplus,
Right.
they don't subsidize each other.
Thank you.
And the landfill fees are the tipping fees. Right?
Tipping fees, correct.
Anyone with any questions for Eric? Okay. So what I thought we'd do is kind of go back to the beginning of this handout and kind of hit these items one by one, and then we need to also hear from Councilwoman Peters as well on her proposal regarding Southwest Renewal. Is there anyone who has any kind of proposal the first thing issued was transit, and that was really, I think, more informational, but is there anyone who has any kind of a proposal that would affect the budget regarding transit? Okay, I'm not hearing anything, so we'll move on from transit then. So the next one was the mental health professionals from the police department. And it sounds like Chief Stroud has said he's not quite ready for that, but the floor is open to discuss that issue or any potential budget impacting proposals.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes.
Just on that note, I've heard what the chief said, and we've also, I've also talked with other officers and talked about some of the money that came from federal dollars that helped to support that idea. I think they're kind of going through a lot of that, checking on it, because I think the one police officer I talked to was talking about some of the response in Durham that had some federal funding, and there may, this is pre-COVID, but there may have been some opportunity still there. So I think it's some work that is necessary, but at the same time, I think that they're already kind of putting the homework in for it. From my information I gathered from talking to police.
So in your opinion, though, they're not they're not at a position yet where they're ready to request any kind of funding?
No, just in the information I gathered, they were still looking at a number of steps to take, how it's implemented and so forth, and they're early on in that process. And then there was also, while at the same time they were still looking at additional funding to do what they're hoping to be able to do, but right now it's still early.
Okay. Anyone else who'd like to be heard on this item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is Councilman Holmes. Chris, I know you said you spoke to the chief. So they're still in the fact-finding mode, so there is a possibility that they could benchmark against the program Greensboro has, or are they already in that process? Have they already done that?
The program I spoke to with local officers were more of the more the programs that's going on, like in Durham. That was the one that had the federal dollars behind it. But they were still looking at a number of processes. But this, like I said, he said it was something that they are looking into and have been now just early. I don't know if it was Greensboro. I don't remember hearing that part, but I just know Durham was the one that we discussed.
I say this, Councilman Jones, I say we visit this some point in time throughout the fiscal year and on the Public Safety Committee where it should go anyway. And then we decide at that point if we need to go any further.
Anyone else want to be heard on this topic before we move on? Okay. So next is this is a section on MWBE. Floor is open.
Is it simply to hire the second diversity and equity?
I don't know.
Handle this, or is this, is that?
I'm not sure what's being asked for.
This is not the DEI position that
No, it's not the DEI position.
they would handle this?
We had said that we would at some point evaluate whether we felt there was a need to add a second position, but
I thought that position would handle part of this. That's why I was confused. But
I thought the DEI position was talking about a specialist that came in, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I thought this was something that was discussed within that department about adding additional specialists, and I thought that was in our book as something that was in the budget already.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't the DEI. I think that the MWBE was a question of, I think just getting more details on what we were doing, and just getting a little bit more data on that. That's what I remember.
okay. All right. Anyone else who'd like to be heard on that topic?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm under the impression that we are looking at possibly adding some resources for research or for fact finding or additional support in terms of programs that we can incentivize or training or development or something like that in the community. And the DEI position would support the facilitation of that. Is that part of the discussion from the expansion of the DEI office?
This is Eric Olmedo. I think the DEI position, specialist position, was really not intended to be an MWBE support position. From staff's recommendation, that that would not be something that could be handled within the DEI role.
So for this particular item, what does staff recommend?
From this,
Do we have any?
From this item, we were just asked to bring back information. We did have a couple of work sessions in the Community and Development Committee on MWB and on statistics. And so we were just asked to bring back updated statistics and to talk a little bit about the potential for the disparity study. And so that there's not a recommendation from staff. It was strictly just information that we were asked for.
Eric, I know that the last time we had federal funds dispersed, that there was a huge disparity in the distribution to minority businesses. Was that part of the discussion when we talked about the disparity study for the American Rescue Plan? How do we prevent that from happening again? Is that something that the community development discussed?
I would say that a distribution of federal funds and disparities wouldn't be anything the city would have control over. If you're talking about us making sure that federal funds were evenly distributed, we didn't have control over that distribution. I may have misunderstood your question.
I'm talking about funds the city received and that we distributed at the local level.
I really don't know that we know that we talked about that. So I'm not, do you have any recollection, Mike? Is that, most of the funds we've received so far have come through community development. But I'm not aware that there's been I haven't seen statistics on that.
Follow standard city policy.
Yeah.
Of course, we track who is being awarded contracts.
Yeah. And so I don't think that the MWB program would necessarily impact that or track that. Because remember, we're talking about funds that the city, at this point, under state law, contracts that the city contracts with contractors for construction projects at this point. That's what we track MWBE statistics on right now for formal and informal bids.
So would it help if we had a separate position dedicated to the management or facilitation of MWBE issues?
From staff's perspective, I think that there are additional, we could act as a community resource for helping build and get the information out to minority and women and disadvantaged businesses. So I think from staff's perspective, we could do more in that realm if we had an additional position, but it was not a recommendation that staff brought forward or the city manager brought forward at this point.
So is that something is that a recommendation before we ratify the budget that staff would like to make now?
I think that's a council decision. I don't think that's a staff decision.
I'm sorry, this is Chris Williams again. I thought the MWBE was more along the line of whether or not we were going to join the Guilford County study. I thought that's what the decision was more linked to, whether we were going to join the study. And we talked about like potential savings if we were, and Eric, I'm sorry, just remind me, this is something that they have already started theirs, or this is coming up? Can you remind me of that again?
Sure. Guilford County has contracted with Griffin and Strong. They began their process of meetings with staff in March. It's about a year-long process. So in my discussions with both Guilford County staff and with Griffin and Strong, the consultant, they said they're at a point where we could join, and there would be some savings by us joining. And there are some elements of the study and the year-long study that are very similar. So the savings there would be about a $50,000 savings over what they projected would be about a $300,000 price tag.
Thank you.
Eric, last question. is there any way possible federal funds could cover the expansion of MWB position in our budget?
I think at that point, that's a question that we still don't have a great answer to. I think it's a potential, but I don't want to, I couldn't commit to that in my reading of the regulations at this point.
We have to keep in mind, too, that this is only money for a few years. This is really not money we ought to be committing to, at least in my opinion. Financially, I don't think it's wise for us to commit it to operational funds. It's because it's not recurring money.
And I also want to mention that
The bill will come from that, for that one day.
when you do go down the path of a disparity study, it is a study that is good for 5 years and then has to be updated. So it's not a one-time and done cost. It is a reoccurring cost over every 5 years.
Anyone else like to be heard on this item?
Mayor Wagner, are we almost done? Can we go back to the Southwestern Renewal Foundation item?
Well, we haven't gotten there yet. We'll get to it.
Okay, thank you.
I haven't forgotten about you. We'll get there. Okay. So next would be the Fair Housing Assistance Program. Questions? Anyone want to be heard on this item?
Councilman Johnson, so we're saying, Eric, what you gave earlier, the annual, this is give or take, about $90,000, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's for the position?
That would be personnel and benefits cost, and then supplies and training and that type of thing.
Okay. And so this would be yearly, about 90,000.
Correct.
Okay. And quite honestly, in my opinion, with everything that we would get for that, I don't think that's a bad investment. Others may disagree, but I do not find that $90,000 for that, everything that our citizens would get, is a bad deal.
I have a question. I'm not sure who to ask it to. I'm just going to ask it. Of the looks like there were roughly 20 cases, 17 to 20 cases that we had. Do we get any kind of information back from the state on how many of those 20 investigations did not find sufficient evidence to bring a case? Do we know how many of those were settled? How many of them were litigated and actually found discrimination?
Sure, Mayor. That's something that we can, this is Jelani Biggs, DEI officer. We can definitely follow up with them on. We serve in the capacity as a referral resource. We're not necessarily privy to that information, but that's definitely something we can explore with the state. Just to see.
Is that something they publish in that office, or?
I don't know about publish,
Yeah.
but in general, I think they track probably national trends where majority of cases are actually no-cause cases or conciliated.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I'm wondering. If we're sending 20 cases down there, and, I'm pulling numbers out of the air because I have no idea, but, if a lot of them end up being, found not to have cause, I'm just wondering, I guess what I'm getting at is are we going to get our money's worth for paying for that when, or is the system we're functioning under right now okay? And, also, I still don't think we're at a point where we've had the feedback of the community. In 2016, when we kind of moved to the, and I'm just talking now, I'm not talking to you directly, but in 2016, when the council at that time moved to the system that we have now, it was really being pushed, my recollection was by the Realtors Association and some of the folks that, rent apartments and I don't guess we've had time for feedback from them. And so I'm hesitant to support any kind of placeholder for funding for a position when I just don't think we're that far down the road yet. I'm not saying it's good or bad or that it's needed or not needed, but I do question the number of cases and what happened to them. I'd like more information on that. And then also, I think we need to have more time to go and get input from stakeholders in the community before we do this. It's easy to say that we can provide a better service, but we still have an obligation to determine for sure whether the service is needed and what the public impact might be to not just the renters or not just people who may be complainants in that system, but also to the people who are renting the property, because it impacts them too. If someone is bringing an unfounded case, that property owner has real costs. Cost to hire an attorney, cost cost of time just to produce the documentation necessary to defend themselves too. So there's more than one side to this. And I know that, Jerron, I think your department is kind of handling this and pursuing, reaching out to those stakeholders. And I personally, I'd rather revisit this down the road and see where we are. I just don't think we have enough facts to know what's going on yet.
We're, Mayor, this is Councilman Johnson, and we actually are working on that, so we will be bringing more information to the council as a whole.
Again, this is something that I don't think we should hold the budget up for. I think we can, if we do come to the conclusion as a council that this is something we want to do, I think it's something we can handle through a budget amendment later on. But, that's my 2 cents, and the floor is open for anyone to speak on this. Anyone else who'd like to be heard on this issue?
Yeah, this is Councilman Hudson. I would like to echo somewhat what you said. The concern that I have is that we already pay for this service, whether we want to or not, through state taxes. So citizens are already paying for this service. If we bring it in-house, citizens are already going to be paying for the service that we're not going to use, and then we're going to be asking citizens to pay for a new service that the old service was provided. So they're paying twice for the same service, and we don't get a refund on the money that we spent in the first place for the service that we're not using. So it's not an easy decision. I understand, if you spend $100,000 to bring anybody in to do a job, you're going to get more done. If you hire another person, you'll get more work done. I don't necessarily, not necessarily sold as the best direction, though, since we're already paying for the service. I'm in the same boat with you. I'd like to just hear more.
But the issue is, the issue is access. Do they have access? Whoever they are, have access. They do not. They're not going to drive down in their car to Raleigh, okay, when they can drive here. So I know we're looking at what we're getting for this $90,000. We could ask that a lot in the budget with some things. What are we getting back in return? So I think let's think about it with an open mind. Let's don't just look at it, oh, it's $90,000, okay? Because honestly, I could look through this book and say, oh, we can take this out. I mean, so let's be open-minded about it and look at it on both angles. Whoever owns the house, apartment, whatever, but who also rents the house or the apartment. So let's look at it on all levels. So again, the magic key is access. Do they have access to Raleigh? So we can talk about it later once we get the stakeholders involved and everything, but again, let's look at the big picture.
Are those cases, when they're brought, are they brought in Wake County, or are they brought in the county where the property is located? Jelani, do you know?
Are you saying what would,
If a
what
case
jurisdiction?
if it goes to court and a case is actually brought, is it filed in the venue in the county where the property is located?
Sure, so the general perception is that these will be federal complaints, especially if it's a dual filed complaint, meaning
Correct.
you filed it with HUD as well.
Yeah.
meaning that you get their federal enforcement power. So this would be held in federal court.
Federal court in Greensboro.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else like to be heard on this item? Okay. I had mentioned before the targeted neighborhood initiatives. I'll open the floor for questions on this one, but it sounds like it's probably going to be something that the staff's going to bring back to us because it's going to be paid for out of the ARPA funds. But the floor's open for anyone who'd like to express an opinion on this item or have questions for staff. Okay. I think we're kind of in the same boat on the Wi-Fi question as well. It sounds like that's the source of those funds is going to be brought later, or discussion will be later when we deal with the ARPA and capital part of the budget. But the floor is open. Anything on solid waste? Any kind of a budget impact proposal or about solid waste?
I'm good.
You good? Councilman Hudson?
Good with
Solid
waste.
part of the budget.
Solid.
Solid part.
Okay. And then the electric rate comparison, I don't think we're going to be discussing a further drop in our electric rates or any change from what y'all proposed, but the question's out there if anybody wants to talk about electric rates. Okay. Councilwoman Peters, the floor is yours for your proposal regarding Southwest Renewal.
Thank you, Mayor Wagner. Yes, and based on the facts is what I'm kind of going on. You know, Southwestern Renewal Foundation, it isn't a nonprofit agency. It's a foundation, and it is involved with community development. And just so that everybody kind of understands why I see them as a partner with the city, as opposed to some of the other nonprofits on our list that do really great work. Southwestern Renewal Foundation focuses on community development, which by definition is a long-term investment, creates conditions for social and economic progress, which we all agree we want in High Point. The definition of charity is an immediate relief, donations to aid the poor, ill, or needy. And then human services is again immediate relief, and it includes social work and related programs from food assistance to substance abuse, counseling, delivering through agencies for meeting basic needs of a group. So I clearly see Southwestern Renewal Foundation as a community development nonprofit partnering with the city. So I would like to make a motion to add them to the budget at $50,000 a year.
Okay, Councilwoman Peters has made a motion to add Southwest Renewal to the budget at a cost of $50,000 a year. Is there a second?
Second, Johnson.
Okay, the motion has been seconded by Councilman Johnson. I'm taking my notes here. All right, so the floor is open for discussion on the motion.
Where are we taking that money from?
Staff can make a recommendation and come back to council.
Thank you.
What, Councilwoman Peters, what would be the purpose of the money?
Well, there's several things, you know, grant writing. You know, if the city had to hire a grant writer, that's, you know, really expensive, but grant writing, easement acquisitions, planning, and as far as where the money can come through, it actually kind of fits in 3 different departments. So it could, I guess it would end up being like 12.5 or 13.5, each department being transportation, parks and rec, and community development.
There's nothing that, just Councilman Jones, how is this different, in your opinion, Monica, than the nonprofit allocation that you would request?
I think she mentioned that already.
Well, and the nonprofit allocations, those are for specific projects. So there's a lot of things that I think Southwest Renewal Foundation does that also kind of fits them into that category, like public art. You know, they raise money and write grants for public art and those type of things that I don't see fits clearly in getting a a budget item for community development. But when it comes to these grant writings to get federal funds and the acquisitions of easements and building an urban greenway, I think that that is community development and will be, especially phase one, will be super important for economic growth in that southwest corridor, that we already have a group from staff that are working on things like the opportunity zone, small scale manufacturing grant, and all those will have a huge return on the investment for the city of High Point.
So the funds would just be given to Southwest Renewal for use in whatever way they deem appropriate?
I would imagine if we wanted to earmark them for something, we could probably ask them to earmark it.
Absolutely.
Aren't we required to do that, though, if we have an agreement like with Forward High Point?
Yeah, let's hear from the city attorney on this.
Yeah, it's city attorney weighing in. I think we would have to have an agreement in place with them where they would have to actually identify the public purpose that they were serving. It doesn't really set them apart from the other group that you were mentioning a while ago, but we definitely have to have something in writing.
I totally agree, Joanne. I think that that would be a great thing to do. So can we go ahead and put that in the budget, and then put some writing that says that it is in, it will be confirmed once we have a signed contract?
Hold on. We'll get you an answer in just a second, Councilwoman Peters. The attorney is conferring with staff.
Monica, it's Joanne again. I just stepped over to talk to Eric because, you know, in the budget, you don't generally define what the purpose of the money is to that extent when you're giving it to an outside organization. All of that is covered in the written agreement, however, you know, where we flesh out exactly what the public purpose is so that there's proof the city is contributing to an organization that we legally can. And I'm trying to figure out exactly how we could go ahead and have the contract in place prior to the budget and that amount being approved and put into the budget, since that language really isn't in the budget. If that makes any sense at all, if somebody could help me with that timing of process, that's.
Basically, are you saying that you think we need to have a proposed agreement in front of council before?
Yeah, we usually and again, Monica, I understand you're trying to separate it from the nonprofits, but that's the best thing I know how to compare it with, because we've got the obligation as a city, a government, to show that the purpose of this fund, or these funds, is going to be something that's allowed. And generally, they come to us and they explain how they're going to use it. Eric, please correct me if I'm wrong. And then we will enter into an agreement, and then, of course, we have the right to do some accounting throughout the year to monitor and make sure they're using those funds correctly.
For traditional outside agencies, but I think
Right.
there are numerous cases where we have budgeted amounts for a purpose, as long as it's a public purpose, that we don't necessarily have an agreement with when the budget is adopted.
Right,
I
right.
think we can definitely,
Right.
I don't see that as a concern.
Just identifying like the easement acquisitions, as long as you're able to show us what you're thinking about doing, and that's going to be tied to a public purpose that'll benefit the city of High Point, you know, that's fine too. Does that make sense, Monica?
Yeah, but you mean as long as they show, you said you
Right.
show.
Yes,
It won't be me showing
My
it, it will be
apologies.
they.
Absolutely, absolutely. As long
Okay,
as the
but
foundation-
I also, and I totally get it, I totally understand everything that you're saying. So I had brought it up a couple of weeks ago. We've got amazing staff, so everyone kind of knew that that's where I was going. They are not a new foundation. They've been around for years, and everything that they do as far as grant writing and anything through the city has been done without question in an excellent manner that has been very good for the city. So I don't, I understand if this was a whole brand new group that I was asking about, but they've already done so much. And I think that our staff could figure out a way that we could vote on that being part of the budget.
Well, and it's Joanne again. Just a quick question, like a while ago you referred to the grant writing or drafting. Would that be on behalf of the city?
Yes. I mean, she's already done it a lot, and I think Eric, and I don't know if Greg's in the room, but Greg can probably answer this too, and she did it a lot with Randy Heeman, but, there's sometimes grants that need to be entered by the city. And sometimes the cities don't apply for the grants because it takes a long time and a lot of work and a lot of money to do these grants. But Dorothy in the past has asked and has been allowed to write grants for the city so that we can get the money and, that the city could receive the money and with no money for her grant writing.
Mr. Mayor, Greg Ferguson, I would just add to what was just mentioned. The process currently is that most of the grants that we are submitting to the federal government must originate from the city and have the city's name on it and have a city point of contact. I think what we've seen with Southwest Renewal is certainly cooperation and use of content. And so in some of the most recent submittals that the city has submitted on behalf of Greenway projects, some of the content that Southwest has created and paid for in regards to cost-benefit analysis, job creation, cost of the infrastructure itself, we have absolutely utilized that. It's been packaged together in a very collaborative manner, and I think in a positive manner to make the submittal very strong. But at the end of the day, the city staff has to submit that and has to be the point of contact. And so just to get clarity about grant writing, what we're seeing today is that outside agencies can submit grants and may be able to stand on their own, but the best efforts are certainly those that are collaborative in nature and are coordinated and then are followed up by lobbying in concert. And I would say from our standpoint, that's one of the things that we want to be the most clear about is that when we're going to our federal legislators that we are in concert and that we're not giving mixed messages. So in that vein, certainly an appropriation would work and it could be earmarked and then a contract could be worked out. We certainly would want to clarify in that contract that we work together always as partners in a collaborative manner and that one party doesn't get ahead of the other.
So just walking through the logistics of this, if we were to vote to create an allocation for $50,000, it would be on the condition that upon the approval of a contract. So that contract would then have to come back to council for final approval before the allocation would go, right? That's the logistics of
I
it.
don't see any other way.
So does her motion need to be amended
If you'd like.
to say what the mayor just said?
I think it would probably be safe.
Clara, yeah.
Yeah, she
could
just
just
asked for
refer.
a straight out allocation of $50,000. Did you mention a contract, Monica? I don't,
No, I think a contract would be great. I mean, so if you want me to amend my own motion, I don't know if that's allowed or if somebody else has to amend it. I would say that I will amend my motion to say that I'd like the motion to allocate $50,000 dependent upon conversations and cooperation with the Southwestern Foundation and the uses of that money to make sure that it's for the public's best scenario.
I think you need, if you're going to amend it, I think you need to specifically state upon the execution of a contract.
Okay, all right, so here's my motion. All right, I would like to make a motion that the city of High Point allocate $50,000 as a line item in the budget at the execution of a contract. Is that good?
I think the attorney is nodding her head. Okay. So this is an amendment of the prior motion. Councilman Johnson, are you willing to consider you second that?
Second, yes, sir.
All right, so we do have a motion, an amended motion with a required second, and the floor is open for discussion on the amended motion.
Yeah, this is Councilman Holmes. I have one question.
Yes.
Monica, in that contract, will you seek provision that will have Southwest Renewal have a detailed financial accounting of the money spent, if approved? I'm assuming that would be part of the contract.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And they every year get audited. Yeah, that would not be a problem at all. And I think that the best way to handle this is maybe, and I can start the email thread, or whoever wants to, an email thread with Dorothy, who's the executive director, Dorothy Darr, Joanne Carlisle, our city attorney, and then, possibly city management, Randy, Eric, and Greg.
Yeah,
Would that be suitable?
The terms of whatever contract is negotiated would have to come back to council, and if we don't like the contract, we don't have to approve it, or we can seek amendments to that contract until it's satisfactory to 5 of the 9 of us.
Okay.
This is Councilman
Councilman
Johnson.
Jones is recognized.
Councilman Peters, if approved, would you then, or do you have any knowledge that the Southwest Renewal Foundation would retract their ask from the Finance Committee's nonprofit allocation?
No, because that was a specific ask for a specific project.
So you want the $50,000 and $25,000 to come from the nonprofit allocation as well?
That would be good.
Any other questions on this topic? Or we call for the vote?
Yes, I'll say, I have 2 things. I apologize for 2. For one, I don't understand how this is going to help the city accomplish anything. We already have an economic development department that we pay. We already have Parks and Rec department that already takes care of the greenway. So if we're putting $50,000 to a nonprofit that is doing the same thing that the city is already doing, we're just paying the city to do the same work that we're already doing, and it doesn't really gain anything for us. My big heartburn with Southwest Renewal, and this, I hope, this goes back to what Eric said. The nonprofit allocations have a stipulation that the money is spent for the project that it is dedicated for, and at 12 months, we get to see that project. And for the second time, they've still not presented a project. We gave them $20,000 last year. As I recall, there's $20,000 from 2019 to develop an app and a web design that we still haven't gotten the presentation for. And we didn't give them that money for quite a while because we were being held up by them specifically telling us what the money was used for. And the reason that we did that in the first place was because we never got a presentation from the last year with how they spent their money. So it seems that there's an issue with me personally to give Southwest Renewal money without seeing how the money that we gave them last year was spent. So I would like to see a presentation on how our last funds designated to them were spent before I would agree to give more money to Southwest Renewal.
And so now is the first time that you're going to ask about it? I mean, why haven't you asked for a presentation prior to now?
Because it's not my job to. That's Southwest Renewal's job. They're the ones that got the money. They're supposed to present to us.
Did the website, this is Councilman Jones, did the website and app ever get created? Does anybody know?
I know that they had a lot of work done on the website. I'm not exactly sure what, but I mean, somebody from from staff, or I can contact the Southwestern Renewal Foundation. I mean, if you want to have some clear questions answered from them, I can make that happen.
My personal feeling on it, I don't have a problem with voting to maybe to set the funds aside. I'm going to withhold final judgment though, until I see the contract and what the actual use of the money is going to be. Because we just have, regardless of the amount, we have an obligation to make sure we're not wasting taxpayers' money. And I just want to make sure I know what it's going to be spent on, and that there's going to be accountability for it. I don't have a problem with setting it aside right now, but let's find out for sure what it's going to be spent on before.
Okay, well, that's the motion. That was the amended motion, so.
Okay, I'm just speaking my mind on it. Anyone else who'd like to be heard on this before we vote?
I just have a question. What's the difference in us setting it aside now versus just amending the budget if we approve of the contract? I want to do this later on.
Just timing. We don't have to approve the money now. We could, you could place it in finance and study it and come back with a budget amendment later. It's really, Eric, you correct me, it's really 6 one, half a dozen the other.
From staff perspective, there's no difference.
I don't personally see the point in agreeing to something that we don't even know what we're agreeing to, just to set aside money at this point. I'd be happy to revisit it once we have a contract, but it's way too preemptive for me to agree to that.
Anyone else like to be heard? Okay. So the motion is to create an allocation to Southwest Renewal Foundation pending the execution of a contract with that organization during the 21-22 budget year. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore's not present. Councilman Williams, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
No.
Councilman Jones?
No.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
The mayor votes aye, so the item is approved. Let's see if my arithmetic is correct, by a vote of 6-2. Okay, so we'll look down the road for a proposed agreement, and then upon that, if we get to an agreement, then we'll, that money will be allocated. Okay, that is, I believe, all we have on the agenda today.
Can I add one?
Mr. Almeida?
If I may add one thing, that we're still trying to get the final details on, but the county fire districts, which our fire department manages the fire service for Deep River and for Colfax, they are changing their tax rates for the Deep River Fire District, which will result in more revenue for us to provide those fire services. We're still trying to work with the county to make sure that is solid in their proposed budget. So the timing of this is kind of in conjunction with our proposed budget as well. One of the things that the fire department and Chief Reed has proposed is that we add 3 firefighter positions to the fire department that would be paid for by a combination of the increased tax from the fire district and a decrease in overtime that they currently spend. It would be a revenue neutral proposition for the city of High Point. If we have support for that, we can bring it as a budget amendment, or if we are far enough along where we feel comfortable, if staff feels comfortable with making that recommendation, that's something we would like to have in the final budget as well. So we'll be getting more information, but just wanted to make you aware of that, and that
Okay.
if that possibility exists, it'd be easier to put it in the final budget, or we could come back with a budget amendment after the fiscal year begins.
Why don't y'all work up the figures on that, get it out to everybody to look at? And as long as we're comfortable with adding that in, I don't see a problem with it. So let's talk next steps. It's 20 till 5. Like to be out of here by 5. I think 2 hours is enough to kick this around. But we do have, we're not currently scheduled to meet on the 7th.
Correct.
We're not currently scheduled to meet on the 7th. But we do need to approve a budget at some point. Is the group comfortable enough with telling staff to go ahead and produce documents so that we can get to a vote?
Yes.
Okay. Speak now, forever hold your peace. All right. So go ahead and prepare documents to be executed, and can't vote on the budget today because that's not part of our special meeting notice. Would anybody be opposed to scheduling another special meeting for the purpose of adopting the budget? Councilman Williams, you want to be heard?
Shannon,
Whoop.
what, and forgive me, it's late for me anyway. What was the name of the guy that I had over at Plaza Suites before? Mike? Last name?
Jones?
Okay. Do we want to think about scheduling a special meeting to adopt the budget, or do we want to wait till the second meeting in June to do it? What's the feeling of the group?
Do we have to get back together to discuss it? Can it be a virtual meeting?
Right now, we're still on virtual meetings.
I'd say let's do it virtually if we don't have anything else to discuss. No.
Okay. Okay, so how far out do we need to notice that? The public hearing's been closed, so we could do it
48 hours.
48 hours. That give you guys enough time to,
Sure.
What time on Friday?
well, it's almost 5. I would feel better since it is 48 hours.
Yeah, next.
For us not to meet at 5 o'clock on a Friday. So it's not 2 days, it's 48 hours. So, we could do it. Here we canceled the meeting on the 7th, but we could do it, Monday. No, Monday's Memorial Day.
Do it Tuesday.
Tuesday? Why don't we schedule it for Tuesday? Are y'all okay with a morning meeting? Just get it out of the way? Or do you want to go do afternoon?
Can we do 4 o'clock on that Tuesday?
Yeah, I prefer afternoon.
Okay. Well, I'm fine with 4 o'clock. Everybody okay with 4 o'clock?
All right.
Okay, we'll schedule it for 4 o'clock, Tuesday the 1st, to vote on the budget. And if the clerk would get the notice out, that'd be great. I think we've covered everything that was on the special meeting notice. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, Councilman Holmes has moved to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Hudson. Is there any objection to adjourning the meeting? Okay, hearing none, the meeting's now adjourned.